How's that?
Sounds good.
So I will read you the back cover to give you further details of where we're going with this interesting story. Sweeping changes. When the old street sweeper's memory deserts him, this smacks of magic, not a senior moment. He's left with his broom and a reflection that talks back in a snarky voice. But when he sets out to learn more, he finds himself up against foreign invaders who take a dim view of his interference. One officer decides he's in the way and making her look bad, so she sends assassins after him directly. His fighting skills with the trusty broom won't be enough to save him, but his memories are starting to trickle back, thanks in part to clues from that talking reflection. It turns out he was someone important, someone with magic of his own, someone who might just be able to stop the invasion if he can keep himself alive and regain the rest of those memories in time. Now, it was kind of challenging to find a scene that is worth reading and not something that's going to give away everything, but I think I found one that's interesting enough. And at this point, he's being given a ride home by a pair of city guards after just stopping some of the bad guys. It's nighttime, there is early horseless carriage level technology, and they just noticed someone is following them. The other carriage was fast. It followed them through a series of turns until the two vehicles were racing down a scenic lane by the river, and the guards were preparing to shoot the wheels off the other carriage. The driver's attention was on avoiding corners, while the other guard was drawing her firearm, when a second carriage, careening out of an alley, took them by surprise. All Hess saw was a flash of motion and something large, then the whole world shook and tilted, rolling sideways over the railing and out into thin air. The impact with the river was savage, breaking parts of the carriage and slamming the passengers into anything within reach. The seat straps were what saved Hess. He only hit his head on the wall behind him, which was slightly padded. It took him a moment to get his bearings as the carriage started to sink. He found water swirling around his knees, and the carriage tilting toward the front where more dark water was pouring in. Both of the guards were awake and moving, yelling for him to get to the back door. He unfastened his straps and did his unsteady best to reach the doors. He had to climb up the seats to get there. Behind him, the guards were escaping out the broken windows with a garbled yell about coming back for him. This made no sense until he reached the back doors and found that there were no handles on the inside. Things weren't looking good, with the vehicle tilting even more dramatically downward. Then something scrambled against the door and undid the latch from the other side. Hess pushed while the water level surged upward. The door opened to show the pair of guards heating on the handles. Hess climbed up and tumbled over the edge, falling a few inches into cold, dark river water. He felt the door slam shut behind him moments before the carriage sank completely under the water and was pulled away by the current. He surfaced to find the air filled with strange sounds and small things impacting the water nearby. In the darkness, he had no idea what was going on until he heard a cry of pain from the male guard. Then he recognized the gunshots for what they were. He took a deep breath and ducked back under. The water was very dark and very cold, but he felt himself instinctively altering details of his body to compensate. He didn't even need a reflection to show him how. Moments later, his eyes could make better use of the weak light filtering down from the moon and the streetlights at the surface, while his lungs became amphibious. Hess opened his mouth to let water filter through, exiting out the gill slits on the sides of his neck. He kicked off his shoes and flexed the webbing between both toes and fingers. Then he took off with gratifying speed, swimming upriver along the bottom too deep for his attackers to see him. Being underwater felt oddly like home, but he didn't follow the thought. The carriage and the guards were being swept further downriver with every moment, and the attackers' attention would be following them. He took no chances, powering upstream until he was sure that he was far past the place where the carriage had fallen in. He hugged the shoreline and found a small pier to surface next to. He kept out of sight as much as possible, and raised just his eyes above the water level. The night was well lit to his new vision. He spotted 4 human shapes clustered in the shadow of a building with guns drawn. As he watched, one of the 4 crept downstream, sticking to the shadows and watching the river. The other 3 were looking too, but not in Hesper's direction. He heaved himself out of the river, feeling water drain from his throat before the gills merged back into normal flesh. He kept the eyesight. The river rushing past made a constant low level of noise, more than enough to mask the sound of water dripping from his clothes, as he crept on silent feet over to where the assassins hid. Another of the group left the hiding place to join the first in searching downstream for bodies, which suited Hess just fine. He undid his slim belt as he walked, creeping up on their main pair while they looked the other way. He looped the belt over the head of the closest assassin, yanking it tight and pulling the man bodily around the corner before he could alert his companion. There Hess slammed his head against the wall, dropping him where he crumbled. He freed the belt and readied it. The other assassin was just stepping around the corner with her gun at the ready when the metal end of the belt snapped her in the eye. She exclaimed and ducked, raising the gun to aim at someone who wasn't standing there any longer. Hess got the belt around her neck too, though he had to let go with one hand to keep the gun away from his own head. A swift kick to the woman's knee took her down. He took control of both the gun and the arm that held it, using it as leverage to grind the assassin's face into the pavement. A strong hand at her neck put pressure on the biggest artery. He pressed a knee into her back while he counted up the seconds until her brain was deprived of air to stay conscious. It took a long time, but finally the assassin went limp. A glance at the other one showed him to be similarly unconscious. Hess snatched up the gun and found it to hold only 5 bullets, 3 of which were missing. He heard footsteps approaching. The other assassins had noticed his takedowns. He slid to the ground and peered around the corner, with the stolen gun aimed at the new attackers. A quick glance showed him 2 dark-clad strangers, definitely not the guards, and they were getting close. He sighted down the gun at the first one and squeezed the trigger. He was, it turned out, a terrible shot. And I'll leave it there.
That was a good cliffhanger. Any questions for Mara?
I was just wondering if your main character is modeled after someone you know or knew, or if maybe he's a combination of people, or how did you develop your character?
I'd say a combination, nothing really conscious, nothing that I decided to mix different elements, but certainly parts of his personality were things that I appreciated from different people. I think even some of it I probably got from Doctor Who. Some of it I decided that visually, okay, he probably looks like Ian McKellen, and he'll have that kind of dignity, and just little things that would just subconsciously come together to just appear as I worked on it. But I definitely didn't decide to base him on anyone, but I think, yeah, certainly a lot of things came together without me realizing it.
Susan?
I noticed with how much relish you wrote that scene with all the violence in it. And I was just wondering, like, is that, I mean, and I don't mean that in I'm not questioning, but it's just wondering if it seemed like you enjoyed that. And writing action takes a real talent. And so maybe you could talk about how you feel about writing some of these more dramatic scenes, or if you have favorite scenes, like what's the kind of scene you like the best?
Sure, there's definitely a lot of different kinds of scenes that I like the best. I do certainly enjoy action scenes, and I've always liked the fighting and adventures, and I've done karate because, well, fighting is cool. Though I've never been in a real fight, it's still cool in concept. I've always liked the action scenes and the heroes who can beat up the bad guys and all that good stuff. But there's other kinds of scenes that I enjoy too, where in this book in particular, there's a lot of big revelations that are, wow, I did not expect that scene to go there. And those are really fun in a totally different way. And in general, I like exploring different kinds of things. I like stories where I get to make up species, make up places and cultures and interesting things like that. And this is where I can make stuff up and make it interesting and new. And yeah, action's fun too.
Any other questions for Susan? There we go.
The plot to the story sounds complex and full of magic, and I'm just wondering, how did you even dream this up? I mean, where did you get the ideas from somewhere in particular, or?
Originally, it was inspired by a song. It was called Viva La Vida by Coldplay. It was on the radio a few years ago. The main part of the lyrics that gave me the idea were the part that says, I used to rule the world, seas would rise as I gave the word, but now I sleep alone, sweep the streets I used to own. My first thought on hearing that is it's probably about a breakup, but if you took it literally, that would be a really interesting story. And at one point I was doing a short story challenge with some friends where every day of the month we'd each write something. And for the last week of the month, I ended up writing several different somethings about the same character. And I ended up with a lot of interesting ideas that I really wanted to make into a book. And eventually I figured out how, by putting them in reverse order that I'd written them in. But I got to explore a lot of interesting, fun things, and I'm so glad I got to put it into a book because I really enjoy it. And it's a lot of fun to write something that you really enjoy. And according to people who've read it so far, other people like it too. That's really what you're after as a writer.
How true. Any other questions?
It's not intended to be young adult specifically, but it certainly can be. I mean, it's not, excluding any particular ages, but I think I tend to write in more of like the PG general range just automatically. Maybe a little bit of R sometimes, but not much kind of thing.
I'm just curious about whether you knew your character really well before you wrote the story, or did you get to know your character as you were writing the story?
A bit of each, because I knew everything that you learn at the end of the book, at least roughly, because I wrote everything backwards. But I definitely learned a lot about how he would react to things, how he would act, how he was as a person as I went. And that kind of story where you can start with someone not knowing much of anything, where there's memory problems involved, is a really great setup when you don't know anything yourself. Great setup for that. So I definitely learned stuff as I went on, but I think that happens normally in writing, because no matter how much you plan, there's gonna be surprises. Usually good ones, hopefully.
Your book reminded me, or this excerpt reminded me of Waterworld, someone with gills and so on. And I'm curious if you've delved into science fiction, and it seems like a wide open area, and I'm curious how you chose that.
I do like some science fiction along with my fantasy, and yeah, pretty much anything where I get to make stuff up is fun. And yeah, I enjoyed Waterworld. That's a really interesting concept. And one of the other books that I've been working on is very science fiction, no magic whatsoever. It's got a snarky robot as the main character, and I'll probably be getting that one published at some time eventually. But yeah, I very much enjoy science fiction and fantasy. It's always been like, I feel like I should have to choose one or the other.